Hey, listen up. This episode, you could win something. How about that? We got Jack Oller from Crimson Trace. And if you go over to one of our video channels, YouTube, Facebook, Roku, wherever you like to watch our stuff, and comment, you are entered to win. They're going to give away one of those scopes you talked about, the 4-16 by 50 Brushline Pro from Crimson Trace. Hey, welcome into Gun Talk Hunt. This Gun Talk Hunt is brought to you by Timney Triggers, the world's finest triggers. Today on Gun Talk Hunt, we have Jack Oller. Jack is with Crimson Trace and also happens to be a gun nut and a hunter, which is perfect for this.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me on the show.
So, Jack, you and I met, a couple of years ago. And when we met, you were not working with Crimson Trace. You were actually on the gun media side of things.
That's right. Yeah, I jumped ship. I was associate editor at Guns and Ammo magazine. You know, super fun job. I still miss it sometimes. You know, like that. You know, truly unique experiences that. It was a wonderful place to work. But then, you know, I saw what Crimson. It was actually at the event Crimson Trace held. Showcasing some of the new products. That was when we first met, I believe. Yeah. And that was also kind of when I saw, hey, this is what Crimson Trace is doing. We also have this opportunity, and sometimes you just see an opportunity, you have to take it. Yeah. And no regrets. That's
it's working out great, man. So, I'll just jump right into this. You grew up, and I think hunting, because this is a hunting podcast, hunting for a lot of people, the way you become a hunter is you grow up in hunting. You know, it's a little harder if all of a sudden when you're 20 years old, you go, I think I'm going to try hunting. And then you have to learn, how does this work? Where do I go? And all that stuff. You grew up in it because your dad... Talk about that. Your dad was like a wildlife biologist.
So I was blessed, and I couldn't agree more. It is incredibly challenging just to decide one day, hey, I want to be a hunter. But I was blessed. I grew up. My dad was the district wildlife biologist for the Illinois DNR for Knox County, Henry, Warren County, kind of northernish Illinois there. Okay. So, you know, if anybody could be called an expert on Midwest game management, hunting, things of that nature, it is my dad, so I truly fortunate, I got to grow up. My favorite memories were, we would go inspect duck blinds on the Mississippi River and, dad would say, okay, we're doing this. Let's take a day off school.
So he was acting as, I guess we'd all call it a game warden.
No. So the district there's, your game wardens, and then there's your district wildlife biologists. His job had many, many responsibilities, but his was, his favorite part of the job was always he would work with private landowners to develop plans to manage their land for what they wanted to do.
That's cool.
He would go to a place and they'd say, I want a lot of deer. And he'd say, okay, do this, this, and this. And, he'd assist them in finding people that could help them do it. Or, he'd occasionally help find them grains or various, plants, trees, things of that nature. And so turkey, what have you, he would get them set up.
In his role of working for the state.
Exactly. So
a landowner could reach out to the state and go, hey.
Most states have programs like this.
I'm sure a lot of people don't even think of that. Like, hey, we've got all these experts, wildlife biologists, to go, this is what you need to do with the habitat and planting crops or whatever it may be.
Each state's a little different, but pretty much every state has a DNR or equivalent with wildlife biologists that can teach them how to maximize their lands. He always taught me growing up, we are stewards of the earth. Yep. And it's just something that clicked with me from a young age. It's something that, I think about a lot. And, but you can't expect people, that don't grow up in it to know how to do it. And it's awesome to be able to find resources like my dad and his equivalents throughout the country to, maximize your land so that, for the sake of, growing habitat, growing wildlife, just we're stewards of the earth, taking care of the earth. There's a right and a wrong way to do it. Mm-hmm. And, and it's nothing wrong with wanting to maximize your land for what you want to do. If you're a duck hunter and say like, man, I really want ducks on my property. Okay, well, either you have the land that you can do it, or you can kind of make some changes to do that.
Yeah, make it attractive to the animal that you're going after. I heard recently somebody say that hunters, and in particular like landowners, because some people go, well, how do you say you care about the animals when you want to kill the animals? You go, no, the way to think about this is like farmers. Farmers raise cattle to kill the cattle, and they still love the cattle and appreciate the cattle and take care of the cattle. And it's very similar in that way, whether it's ducks or deer or turkeys. I mean, we're hunters, we're conservationists, and it is kind of funny, I guess, for someone to go, wait a minute, you're planting all these food plots and you're trying to manage the habitat and the protein level and all these different things to grow the deer or attract the ducks or whatever in order for you to hunt them.
You know, my brother, he puts it in the funniest way. He says, if we don't hunt them, they'll die. But it's so true, you know, like,
Yes.
you know, if we don't hunt them, they'll die. And that's, you know, proper game management is the reason we have this massive deer population in Illinois. When my dad grew up, apparently, you know, he tells me all these stories. Like, it was a big deal if you knew a guy who drew a tag for a deer in Illinois when he grew up. Like, that was a big deal. And now, you know, they're almost like rats. There's so many of them, you know, like they're everywhere, and, you know, their population has exploded, and they're big deer. I mean, they're big deer in Illinois, and that's thanks to proper game management and having an appropriate, you know, hunting management. What goes along with that. And hunting, you know, he always would say, like, you know, the DNR is one of the few branches of government that almost pays for itself, in that, you know, all these animals are held in the public trust. And so you buy a tag for the right to go take an animal, and that costs money. And that money goes back into these, you know, wildlife habitat management programs. You know, we set land aside for public use. We make sure that the game is managed. So, you know, Illinois in particular, like, deer don't have a natural predator. So if we don't hunt them, inevitably their population will just explode. That's going to lead to disease. More of them are going to get hit by cars. You know, it's just, if we don't hunt them, they'll die.
And there are use cases or studies on this. If anybody's wondering, just Google Kaibab Desert in Arizona, where they basically outlawed hunting. The deer ate themselves out of house and home, and it destroyed that area's deer population for a decade or more, because we didn't hunt them.
Right.
You know, and it's a great point. And we see that across the world. And the cool thing is the North American wildlife management model going other places. And, you know, one example is Africa. People go, well, I don't like the idea of you hunting these beautiful animals that I've seen on National Geographic. I'm like, if the animal does not have value, and I mean like dollar value, it's not worth anything to the natives who live there. And then it's just a nuisance.
Right.
I mean, when someone will come in and pay big bucks for a big five animal, now the natives are like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Let's take care of these buffalo, elephant, giraffe, whatever.
There's incentive to keep them around.
There's some dumb hunter guy in America that'll pay me $50,000.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
You know, I think, you know, well, you know, the U.S. is certainly not a perfect place, but one of the greatest things they've done, you know, our National Park Service, you know, the amount of, you know, the habitat management and the wildlife management in our country, I mean, is pretty much a standard for the world, I think. You know, we do overall do a pretty phenomenal job for the most part. And
another thing that's interesting, and kind of diving into this, the wildlife biologist part of this, is the people who aren't into hunting, don't understand this part of it. Is they'll pick an animal, or maybe they just don't like hunting, and they just, well, man, you're going to kill all these animals. Or they'll pick an animal that they really, it tugs at their heartstrings. Okay. It's a bear, or if it's a wolf, or it's a whatever. And how could you guys kill? The wildlife biologists studied it, and they've said, not only you can take this many, you should take this many.
You need to keep up with the management of the species.
So if they go, okay, Montana, we need to take 300 wolves, or whatever it is, or Idaho, or wherever. And that's the appropriate amount to take. We didn't just pull this out of thin air.
Right.
The wildlife biologists go, we studied it. We know what the population is, and we know where it's headed. This is what needs to happen.
Well, it's an ecosystem, right? Like, basically all animals, their population is going to grow it grows until the food source stops. You know, so for wolves, for example, they're going to hunt elk, deer, whatever they can find essentially. And that population does not stop growing until they have decimated the local, so it's balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there's too many wolves, they're going to eat way more of the deer population. Then the deer population goes away, then all those wolves starve to death. And then you've got land that is has nothing. And, if you have too many deer, their population is going to grow and grow and grow until disease kind of takes over. Chronic wasting disease is, a big concern in Northern Illinois. That was actually part of, Dad's job was these cull hunts in Northern Illinois. Deer, they'd go out, not enough deer were being killed during hunting season, and they would go out and then he would test the deer. He would take samples from the deer, the various lymph nodes and things like that, and test for chronic wasting disease. And, that part of their job is studying this disease. But the biggest problem is just there's so many deer. When it's like people, you cram a bunch of people into the city, disease spreads quickly. You have a bunch of deer in a concentrated area, disease spreads quickly. So, and deer are not like people. You can't ask them to social distance, right? So if we don't hunt them, they'll die.
And I think anybody who listening to this, they're probably more on the I'm a gun owner, I'm a hunter side of things. But this is just great information to have in your intellectual ammunition when you're talking to other people or they ask you, why do you hunt? And one thing is, and Jax, you're talking about it, is the increases in population. And it's pretty easy to look that up and you can see where were we in about 1900 before we really started all this and where we are today with deer, turkey, ducks, all that stuff. My favorite one is the National NWTF, National Wild Turkey Federation, has been doing a really good job of, helping wild turkeys and the population, the habitat and all that stuff. But to the point of now they've almost worked themselves out of a job. My favorite one is somebody said, you know what NWTF stands for, right?
What's that?
Now what the
That's pretty good. But,
we got 8 million turkeys now.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the thing is constant vigilance is what I would respond to that. Is maybe right now they've worked themselves out of a job, but if we aren't constantly proactive about managing the population, eventually we're going to need them again. And then, they have this tribal knowledge now of how to properly manage turkey or really any of the big groups, Pheasants Forever, groups of that nature, they have this tribal knowledge now. And if we think, okay, they did it, good job, go home.
Oh yeah. It's just a funny thing.
Yeah,
we've had a lot of success there. Hey, this Gun Talk Hunt is brought to you by Pyramyd Air, your #1 resource for everything air gun. Have you ever considered hunting with an air gun? And I'm not just talking about pellet guns. They actually have big bore stuff. The PCP, pre-charged pneumatic, they've got everything for that over at Pyramyd Air. And we have a deal for you. Enter Gun Talk Hunt, all one word, at checkout. You'll get $10 off any $50 purchase, plus free shipping with any purchase of $150 or more. Find all your gear for hunting with air guns at pyramydair.com. All right, so you haven't told me the story, but we were talking about we grow up hunting. Our dads or our uncles or our grandpas or whoever teach us generally. You have a story about hunting with your dad that you said, this is a pretty good one.
Yeah. I mean, good is a relative term, I suppose. But, my dad broke his back falling out of a tree stand. I believe this was 2018, late August, or maybe 2019. I forget which year exactly. But if anyone could be called an expert at putting up a tree stand, it is my dad. He takes all the safety precautions. He goes up, he puts the tree stand up, he wears his harness.
Really?
But he had a double failure. The tree stand broke, and then his prusik knot on his harness broke, and he fell about 20 feet, and L3 vertebra was crushed, broken leg, cracked ribs, all the odds and ends you get from falling out of a tree, right? The catch, though, is we did not find him for 22 hours.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, so how
did this come about? So you guys knew he was going out hunting?
Dad, has many great qualities, but telling people where he's going was not one of his best ones.
He just goes.
And so if anyone takes anything from this is tell somebody, if you're going out to go hunting, go for a hike, if you're going to be outside for an extended period of time, hey, I'm going to go out and be doing this. And if you don't hear from me for 2 days, maybe ask, try to give me a call or, let somebody know. Right. So we didn't find him for 22 hours. His phone was in the truck 60 yards away.
Wow.
And he crawled 40. Like I went to where he fell, and he was honestly fortunate because the tree kind of overlooked this ravine. If he'd fallen on that side, he would have gone down this hill, and then who knows, what would have happened. But he crawled about 40 yards, and before his back kind of gave out, and so he spent the night in the woods with a broken back. And now I'm happy to say that he's about 95%. I would say
that's great.
A couple back surgeries,
wow.
And physical therapy, and I remember one of our we did a turkey hunt together after he'd fully recovered, and Dad should be dead, right? And here we got to go do this turkey hunt. This man taught me how to hunt. And so still hunting with my dad is one of my favorite things. I'm still learning. I'll never not be learning from him, right?
I bet.
He's forgotten more about hunting than I know. And but the fact that he was able to recover, and then we got to go do a turkey hunt, and we took 2 birds from the same tent, in one, he master turkey caller as well. He called in 2 birds, and we took home 2 birds that day, a year after he'd broken his back. And
yeah,
I mean, we're lucky to have him, let alone be hunting, right? He's lucky to be alive, let alone walking. So
that's one of the things about hunting. It's part of the appeal, and also I guess part of the tricky part about it is you're going out into nature. I mean, in this case, falling out of a tree stand is a little bit different, but actually my dad wrote a book decades ago called Close Calls, and it was just basically true stories of people out in nature and encountering different things and making it out.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many stories and lessons that we hear over the years. I mean, whether that's getting stuck on a mud flat, done it. Getting lost in fog, done it.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of the fun,
right?
But, but it's
there is risk, and that I think that's one of the joys from hunting or being out in nature is this this overcoming obstacles, overcoming challenges. There's this primalness to hunting. Being a hunter and embracing it.
It's a balance. You don't want to do anything. You don't want to do something dumb,
right? And it's certainly good gear. Like it's tree stands, harnesses in particular, like don't skip out. And, it's do not take the short path when it comes, particularly for safety equipment. There is no, it's too expensive. Well, having good gear, particularly for safety equipment, you just have to.
Yeah,
you have to take precautions. Sure. I mean, that's just all there is to it.
Also, know when to say, no.
Right.
Not going to go. I actually had a story. I have a group of guys that we would go duck hunting down in South Louisiana. Great hunting. And it'd be 6 to 8 guys in a couple boats, and it's fairly involved doing this type of hunting.
Mm-hmm.
We would load up Pyros into like center console boats, run down the Mississippi River at 4:00 in the morning in the dark for about 10 miles.
Yeah.
Unload the Pyros into the marsh with decoys, shell buckets, guns, all that stuff. Paddle over there, throw out the decoys, break down all the roseau cane, hide ourselves, hunt. It's usually a great hunt, but it's kind of funny. I never thought I would say this, but I'm like, it's kind of a lot of work. But what happens is it started getting foggy. You had the changes in temperature. River was super cold, and as soon as we hit the river, Mississippi River, and this is the biggest part of the Mississippi River down here with big barges and tankers and all that stuff. It was a wall of fog. I mean, you basically could barely see the end of the boat that you were in.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was just like, woof. And these 2 boats, we all slow down and we're floating out there as we enter the Mississippi River going, what do you think? What do you think? And there was this moment when I think, these guys who are in their 20s and 30s, no one wants to say, let's just turn back. This is dangerous.
Yeah.
Because what do guys say? Dude, you're being a wuss.
I'm invincible.
You're a wuss. Yeah. Oh, shut up, whatever. I had already put on my life jacket, and everybody was like, well, I'm wearing my life jacket. I'm always wearing my life jacket, but it's like there's a lot of that guy stuff that will get you killed. And I think it took one of us and I don't know if it was me. I honestly don't remember if it was me or somebody else goes, dude, I'm not doing this. Let's just go back and make breakfast.
There is nothing wrong with that.
And we turned around, we went and got breakfast or made breakfast at the camp. And after we got there, we started doing it. Everyone's going, man, I'm so glad we turned around. Because you're like, this is
Mississippi's dangerous. You know, like that. It was one of my favorite things. Yeah. So the state had a fan boat that we would go. You know, he would take me out of school to go inspect duck blinds with him, and I think that was hands down like my favorite. You know, Dad took me to work day kind of activity. We got to do this a couple
pretty awesome,
times.
yeah.
And this fan boat was wild too. It had counter rotating carbon fiber blades, like this Corvette engine. And if anyone can drive a fan boat, it is my dad. Like he was ripping. But the Mississippi, like it's a maze. Like, you know, especially where I grew up. There's all sorts of channels and inlets, and you know, there's just it would be so easy to get lost. And, you know, it's the Mississippi. Oh, there's civilization all along the river. Well, there's big stretches where there's just nothing.
Right.
And, you know, if you run out of gas, if you get caught on a sandbar without realizing, well, the nice thing about the airboat is it would kind of skid over that.
Yeah.
But for most people that are in like a traditional boat, oh man, what do? That current doesn't look very fast, but it's moving a lot quicker than you realize.
Oh, it's pushing a lot of water.
You know, if it takes you into a dam, there's dams, you know, that it's dangerous, right? But you know, anyway, I guess I just wanted to talk about the fan boat inspecting duck blinds. That was always
that's fun. So what would you guys do in inspecting duck blinds?
So on the Mississippi, I believe there's a drawing, and you know, for various lots, I believe.
I gotcha.
And then you basically won the drawing to go build a duck blind there, and he mainly inspected it for safety, and it fit within these regulations that you know, the higher department would set. Okay, this is what the duck blind can be, and he would pass or fail it. So you know, that was pretty much it. So we'd go, and then we'd stake the duck blind like with like a number, and like this is the approved spot. You have to build it right here, and then we'd go back and confirm that what was built was within the safety standards, essentially.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
all right. So you are with Crimson Trace now. Crimson Trace started out as a little bit different than what it is today. It's evolved. It's grown. I mean, Crimson Trace, people know them for laser sights on guns, whether it's long guns or whatever, lights. But now you guys do stuff in the hunting world. You have the Brushline series of rifle scopes, and it's a pretty wide range of stuff.
It is, you know, and I like to think that's kind of why they brought me on a little bit, is I've got a nice spread. You know, I was in the Army, I grew up hunting, I understand all the little intricacies of the products that Crimson Trace is now offering. I have to say, the Brushline is part of the reason why I wanted to come to Crimson Trace. You know, like now we have laser sights, and now we have these awesome hunting scopes of, you know, from their classic 3-9 Midwestern deer scope to we have a really nice 4-16 by 50 for kind of like a longer shot, you know, 50 millimeter objective, you know, excellent light transmission, just phenomenal scopes. And, you know, it's just cool that Crimson Trace has all of this now, you know, so I never have to worry about scopes again, right? Perks of the job is all my guns are going to have some pretty decent scopes on them. But, you know, that's part of the reason I think they brought me on, is because I understand the hunter. I understand the home defense, you know, laser sight user. I understand, you know, the hard line, like the tactical side, the competition, the target shooting. Like, I do all of that, right? Yeah. And it's just, that's what my favorite thing about Crimson Trace is, like, we have everything now. You know, if you need to aim a firearm, Crimson Trace has that. Yeah.
So the Brushline, you have a lot of different SKUs. I think we were saying that you guys, between all the different rifle scopes, you brought out what, like 50 different rifle
50 new
scopes?
optics this year in the hardline and Brushline. You know, I guess I'll speak to those.
Do you have a favorite amongst your babies?
Well, from the Brushline, you know, that 4-16 by 50, it's got a 30 millimeter tube. It's got parallax. It's got our new BDC reticle in it. So the Brushline, we're very proud. It's a diamond pattern BDC reticle. And, you know, you've seen like circle shapes in the past.
So a series of diamonds that are stacked up on top of each other vertically.
So instead of like the circles of old, each diamond, you know, has a distinctive point that you can use as, you know, part of a drop compensation, right? Gotcha. So, you know, there's, you know, basically 9 to 12, depending on the reticle that you have, potential holds that you have, and they're more distinctive than just kind of a vague circle. So we're very proud of that. So my favorite, that 4-16, hands down my favorite. It's just the light transmission is amazing. The image quality is amazing. It's just a solid, tough scope, and lifetime warranty for all 50 of the optics.
Really?
So we believe in them, right? I believe in the scopes. We always talk about failure is not an option at Crimson Trace, and we mean that. So, ours is very much if the scope fails, we got you covered. You know? So, it's no warranty registration, no receipt proof, no proof of purchase. It's like, hey, there was a factory failure on my scope. We'll take care of you.
Very cool. So. Yeah. And we appreciate that. And, hunters can be kind of tough on scopes. So
I mean, you drop stuff. I mean, the elements. There's so many variables to what can cause a scope to fail, and that's we try to take as much of it into account as we can. Very cool. Very proud of our testing procedures for the optics. Like we put them through some crap. Like they're
I know. We were talking about the machine. You guys strap these in to replicate recoil, right?
Yeah. So it's cool. We have this amazing shock tower. And basically we can simulate, any caliber for any number of rounds fired. So it's like, okay, I want to do 308 and give me 3,000 rounds. Go.
Wow.
And we'll just, it'd take a couple hours, but it'll do it. We test them for waterproofing. We nitrogen purge them, of course. They're shockproof. Differential. We 6-sided durability testing. So there's like the front to back recoil testing. Okay, but what happens if it falls on its side?
Okay.
Or at a different angle. So we account for that as well. Full submersion tests, hot and cold. So we have this cool machine. Basically, it simulates. It'll go crazy cold, and then like within a minute and a half it goes to like crazy hot.
Oh wow.
To make sure
that's tricky, especially when you're talking about optics and moisture getting in there and expansion and contraction.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the nitrogen purging, like that's important to that, to make sure that seal holds, to keep the nitrogen inside of it so that you don't get fogging on the inside of the glass. Right. So you'll get fogging on the outside, not a big deal, you can wipe that off, but if it ever gets on the inside, you're in trouble, right? You just won't be able to wipe that down and see through the optics. So it's important that the seals on the scope stay.
Sure.
And ours do. So
yeah, that's great. Jack, thanks for being with us, man.
All right, Ryan, thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah. So we'll see you next time on Gun Talk Hunt.